Long poem time. Again, this was the height of my really long poems. Wasn't quite to the storytelling time poems. Or maybe I had already done those. Saturday, August the 13th, 2022, number 3687 is called, and even the title is long, A Practical Guide to Engagement and the Awareness of the Good Fortune of Experiencing It with Glorious Luxury. A sort of how-to primer. I remember when engagement was camaraderie and could, by necessity, mean nothing of the business of family building. However, rather than a melancholic thing, it was instead a rather giddy situation. It made me feel so special, like a somewhat, because we weren't alone, we'd seek each other out, and this club instead seemed much more rooted in a particular kind of inebriation, but that's a bit of a separate subject actually. Unique member of an exclusive club that had a secret handshake or some such. When did all this change? I wonder today. I'm happy to inform, or firstly to have learned, that there doesn't seem to be what I previously had always imagined to have been a sort of general overwhelming feeling of this particular of the particular way of looking at this one word and its ramifications. Engagement, I think, is what we're talking about here. I was happy to leave that sort of engagement be, as it were. This was my way, simply a way of getting to know a person or a group of persons deeper and further, and of exploring values, others as well as mine, of sometimes getting a bit red-faced doing so, and on occasion getting upset, though the underlying giddiness was always still somehow at its foundation, that I was happy that it did not instead involve diamonds, no rings with which to imprison whichever appropriate finger, and certainly no kneeling, no pose of commercial value, like in some engagements, whatever. No symbol that was to encapsulate the beginning, the forever of it all, and no judgment on the tastefulness or tastelessness of the choice of jewelry, of the perfect location wherein to make this risky endeavor. No knowing what the response might be, and it goes on in such ways that anxiety might only be exponentially grown just for this particular time and space, for this one act, this one goal, this one endeavor for which the outcome is but unknown. Boy, did that sound like something I was happy never to have to worry about. Nobody would have convinced me that this might not only be possible in some not so distant now, and hopefully will remain so, but that it might also be met with almost no anxiety. Sure, there's always a little bit in such circumstances, but there needs to be none, and this can be, and believe it or not, can really be accomplished by turning the whole thing into something that is unique as to you, the notion that today, for now, we can very much do this thing. I'm afforded the opportunity that couples throughout history have been to participate in that act of somehow making it official. The fact that I can do this has perhaps helped troubles that arise during these sets of traditional rituals, or will help them, subside over time. But who cares if they help others? I'm here to say that while remaining giddy, but remaining practical, I've honed this process into something of my own, something that once discussed, once I've engaged with that person with whom I want to be engaged, can become almost sublime through the process into the finish. An enlightened growth experience, one of the most important steps of my life. Should I choose to make it mine, to make that ours, I began with a series of questions that, after knowing my person long enough, I have come to understand are some of the most difficult questions to ask, the scariest ones, the ones that scare us the most. And those practical questions which, up until now, and without some forethought, one might never think of, but yet not asking them might cause many more problems as we progress through this dance than if they had instead been brought up to begin with. Ask each question straightforwardly. Begin directly at the top of the hour, before the small talk of a meeting between two minds can even begin. It is pretty amazing how a few seemingly risky questions such as these might work to bring the two of you quite instantly together, and rather than cause anger or nerves or anxiety, what might be felt is peace, contentment, and confidence. This little exercise really works to bring you closer, to alleviate fear, even when an answer isn't what you want to hear. Surprising how acknowledging fear is a delicate but splendid state within which to exist. Perhaps go further by digging deep, especially if you find a particularly sore spot. Don't dwell there for very long, though. Never end it with the fear. Be sure to close out your meetings on a completely different, elevated, and positive subject in which to summarize or just divert in such a way to leave the thoughts open about what has just been discussed. No closure, no official anything at first, just an opening of two minds, yours and your love's. Begin to reduce the possibility of risk with what you say and suggest and ask. Dig less, point out possibilities more, perhaps on a subject that is not quite relevant to the overall theme of your hopeful meeting. Better yet, stay on the subject. It will make your last words before parting ways for a while more important, more relevant, more thought-worthy. But you can learn how to, rather than say them, to manipulate, perhaps mold the conversation into something worthwhile. This is not a solo effort, by the way. This, in fact, could be the end of the solo effort as you have come to know it. This can coerce fierce independence into being a love affair beyond what it already was, and into one that is even more profoundly independent, more solemnly fierce, yet one that paradoxically cannot exist without this newfound commitment, this couplehood. Sound too bizarre to be true? Try it. Oh, to be both proud and participatory, to be both proud and participatory in individuation, but also with the person you love and with whom you've suddenly found yourself in a commitment of whatever sort. A commitment with the notion of an indefinite duration. To love someone to death sounds like a squeeze, sounds like murder. But no one is performing this death upon the other. It is the finite that makes infinity a commitment. It just means that you will both, as one and individually, grow and grow in presently incomprehensible, intimate, and not so intimate ways. That intimacy will continue physically, potentially, more than likely, anyway, in ways unimaginable to the both of you up to this point, until that intimacy is no longer possible. The same can be said for non-physical intimacy. Connections heretofore unimagined will bind the two of you together in ways that will go beyond that date of the impossibility of non-physical. Forget for the moment the question of who will leave this world first. Too much life remains one huge mass of unknown. Praise be to that, I say. And you will too, I confidently feel. What's the difference between this or that so-called engagement? One might say semantics, and this that I'm saying to you has begun with that notion. My fiancé wants me in signed and sealed perpetuity, but our lives meander elsewhere for periods of time, and he is also fine with that. But time and time again, we are back to just us two, no one else, huddled as one or rising in victory above the throngs we laugh at, saying they just don't get it, just don't get us, just don't get it right. Or we're hanging out with our new circle of friends and acquaintances who, with us, engage into the depths of the day or night on some silly singular subject. And what we become from each of those moments is so dependent upon that engagement with those new friends and new acquaintances. So we climb peaks and practically roll into valleys, hand in hand sometimes, less engaged than we are solidly fused into a foundation we have become by this genuine growth. This education as a couple that is impossible to get individually. My fiancé and I are engaged to be married, as if we already are experiencing the fullness, as well as the continued independence of individually content human beings of such fortuitous architecture and engineering, both together and apart. We are fused by love. It can be seen, and we do most deeply feel and know this. It is this presence and this absence that makes our long and wonderful engagement what we both genuinely feel, and sometimes talk about for hour upon hour, the best of all possible relationships. to ourselves, to our community, and the world, all of the best, such that the anxiety-riddled people we once were are but a thankful remembrance, a nostalgia for that. And isn't this all nostalgia? Which we are thankful to remember, and about which we so appreciate the luxury that it will never be either of us again. Whoa. And, I remember that being fun, to write as if I know things, and to even feel that I do, which I do sometimes. That's a really beautiful kind of a marriage piece. I mean, sorry, I'm talking about my own poem here, but I really, it's philosophical. It's my way of thinking about such things, and I really kind of said it mostly. I'm sure I could have done it much better, but it's a very long poem. Sorry about that, but anyway, it got me. Thank you.